Welcome back. Today, with the help of Jason Brazil, who not only links this article but has done a reading of it for us, as we will be going through, we will be covering the subject of why modders are making games more gender diverse. Now, before we get into that, we're going to need a sandwich. Oh, sandwich wench.
Submitted for the patriarchy's approval, a turkey and cheddar sandwich.
Thank you very much, Buttercup. Please go check her out, channel link below. Now let's get into this article. Take it away, Jason.
The modders making games more gender diverse. Hanna just wanted to be a farmer. Not a male farmer, not a female farmer, just a farmer that didn't have to suffer NPC after NPC lumping them into one gender or the other.
Yes, this discussion has actually cropped up in Steam community chat rooms. I've noticed it with Farming Simulator getting a fair amount of comments on reflecting real-life gender, which seem redundant since most of the game, if not all of it, in Farming Simulator 15 especially, was done from first person. Outside vehicles, yes, you could do third person, and you had a generic farmer. I don't want to assume that generic farmer's gender, because you couldn't choose the gender, so I don't really see the problem. You could, I believe, with mods in multiplayer, create a female one, but then again, you want it to reflect your real-life gender, so you want a big old gender sat on a tractor that looks like this. A Tumblr logo driving a combine harvester.
Hanna's hopes rose with the release of Stardew Valley, but after jumping into the farming sim, they discovered it offered only male and female gender identity, with he/she pronouns to match.
Find me one real-life farmer who cares about their gender identity and expression. Find me one farmer who is in fact trans and makes that a selling point of them being a farmer. As someone who grew up on a farm, I'm going to tell you what usually happens. You wake up, you eat breakfast, you go outside and you work until the sun comes down. Then you have dinner. At no point is the discussion of gender relevant. So the fact you want to translate this to a game means that I think gender is irrelevant, especially for games that are simulators. Try the real thing.
As someone who identifies as a non-binary, Hanna couldn't help but be disappointed. I've almost come to expect little to no representation, says Hanna.
Hanna needs to go be a real farmer for a day and see how much her representation really matters. That precious non-binary will get lost in the cornfields.
Being able to play a character that is different from myself is fun and interesting, but playing one true to myself I find is often more fun. It feels more real if you're in the world rather than just an observer playing a person in that world. Unwilling to sit idly by, Hanna took it upon themselves to broaden Stardew Valley's gender diversity, modding the game so that NPCs refer to the protagonist with gender-neutral pronouns, and replacing the gender symbol in the character creator with ungendered body type indicators. The response from other players was overwhelming.
For the most part, I can get on board with the idea of feeling more comfortable with the character you are playing with. You want something that is fully customizable, that can reflect yourself within the game you play in. Like World of Warcraft, where we are all deep down Blood Elf mages. However, with a farming simulator or a farming-based game, do you really think, outside of mods, it's down to the developers to create genders for you? I'd rather they made decent-looking tractors, since I'm not thinking about the character or the avatar that supposedly represents me as I normally play it from first person.
Hi, thanks a ton for doing this. It makes it much more comfortable to play the game, Maddie2 is enthusiastically saying there. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm agender and it's really awesome not having to misgender my character in the game. The feedback has been phenomenal, says Hanna. So many people just enjoying the mod and even telling me when I missed a pronoun or two.
So before we continue, now would be a good time to quickly click on the hyperlink for the gender neutrality mod, which has 45 endorsements and a total number of views of 27,173. This game, by the way, Stardew Valley, has over 1 million sales on Steam. That is amazing. Not all the comments, though, with regards to this mod are positive. There is one that says, I don't personally like the idea behind this mod, but I respect you for taking the initiative to do something you felt was necessary and for seeming to be a respectable person. Is this mod a joke? And as there is a moderator, unfortunately, any and all of the comments that would in fact be critical of or deemed bashing of the mod are gone. Because if you do not like a mod, ignore it. Spouting your disdain for the mod serves no constructive purpose whatsoever. If anything, criticism is constructive. And it can, for the most part, be to the modder's benefit. Removing it creates an echo chamber. Congratulations, moderator Zaldir, you are a bellend.
Oh hey, so you're the new guy, huh? Cool. That's the before. Oh hey, so you're the new farmer, huh? Cool. After.
Which, while seeming to be an innocuous change, if anything shows that there is no real representation of any genders, because the language has been neutralized. Give it time and I'm sure somebody will complain about it.
Much of Hanna's support came from a post they stumbled across on Stardew Valley's official forum. The post echoed Hanna's disappointment in the gender dichotomy, calling for a mod to add a non-binary gender option for the player character. Many other players had thrown their support behind the idea, proving to Hanna that they weren't alone in yearning for a broader representation.
I wonder if I can go on those chat forums and start a conversation to try and get an avatar made that looks identical to Copper Cab. Because who doesn't want a soulless avatar that looks like his nipples droop lower to the ground than his balls?
While Stardew Valley might not have initially lived up to Hanna's expectations, it's hardly the only game to adhere to an outdated gender dichotomy.
It's not that the gender dichotomy is outdated, it's that your fifis are delicate and you want to express yourself in any way you wish you can, in-game form. Which you can, I guess, for the most part with mods, but you want it to be legitimized as gender and expression and identity. All of which is horseshit. There are only two genders.
It is, in fact, better than most, supporting same-sex marriages and child adoption.
This is going to seem callous, but so what? This is a farming game.
Other games, though, tend to be significantly less progressive.
Who cares?
By and large, most games fall short, says Hanna. There are a few games that I've heard do a good job of LGBT representation with preset characters.
Unless the game has a social element with regards to dating and or making a family, I don't see how LGBTQ representation is at all relevant to a farming game. Also, how would someone look if they were LGBTQ in a farming game? I am curious because I want to know whether or not there's going to be a mod one day for the Euro Truck game I sometimes play so I can have a diesel dyke driving my Scania R.
Featuring canonically gay, bi, or even trans characters, but I've yet to see any games that have canonically non-binary or asexual characters.
Firstly, non-binary is only a minority in society because they're not real and in fact only a majority on Tumblr and other such snowflake websites. Second, how on earth do you represent someone who's asexual?
Worse, when games do attempt to portray non-binary characters, they can often do more harm than good. Whether it be the casual transphobia leveled at Erica in Catherine, or the disgusting slurs hurled at transgender NPCs in GTA 5, non-binary characters continue to suffer prejudice and discrimination under the lazy guise of humor.
A fair amount of the complaints in the hyperlink on the Erica game seem to center around how unrealistic it is. My comment to that: instead of playing a game that you want to be more real, why not live in the real world instead? Now, with regards to GTA 5, I had to pull up a few articles because I actually didn't know that GTA 5 is just as transphobic as you'd expect. Thank you, BuzzFeed, for this article. It's actually quite funny. That first picture had me wonder if they were going to Rocky Horror Picture Show or if they were in fact trans in the game in some kind of thread that I'd never come across. Because I've been playing the game for years and I'd never once come across anyone that was trans or noticed any trans slurs because I wasn't really looking for it. I was busy killing prostitutes and getting part of my money back. Or looking for Michael's kids to run them over because that was amusing. This article's from 2013, so let's have a little look at the pictures and the interaction that is transphobic, something which I had not once come across, which is a shame. I'll have to go and look for it in a bit. And the post-op no longer just male. I haven't found any articles written by people who are trans that are complaining, only by straight people who are moaning on behalf of people because they think it's transphobic. Maybe this is. I think it's amusing. But then again, I'm just some straight cephalopod Cthulhu-kin that drinks a bit too much.
Precious few are granted personalities and purposes that extend beyond their gender identities. It's easy to use the character's identity to define them, notes Hanna. That's not what a good, well-written character should be.
Based on how easily offended you are with regards to the lack of representation of non-binary people, and your need to defend those poor defenseless LGBTQ folk who can't seem to defend themselves, probably because they're not taking as much offense to this as you are, I highly doubt that this is in fact the case. I think that once that has been made and certainly corrected, you'll then complain about it again because you want that to be the focal point. It's all about moving those goalposts to suit the narrative of perpetual complaining.
Though Hanna wants to see more non-binary representation, They say that it doesn't belong in every single game, and shoehorning it in only makes it seem artificial and out of place. Not all games have to have LGBT representation, and not all should, but there are games where LGBT representation is appropriate and definitely should be included.
I would hate it if we got to the point where people try to legislate whether or not people had to be represented based on gender identity and expression in video game form. Now, if I was playing a video game and someone decided in their infinite wisdom to start telling me about their character's gender identity and expression, this is what I would do. And they're the one in that plane, by the way.
Fucking cocksucking prick, yeah? Fucking play the game properly, you little shit.
It might not seem like a big issue to some, but when you have to deal with people misgendering and misjudging you on a daily basis, being able to play a game that recognizes and accepts you for who you are can be tremendously empowering.
And I have no doubt that is true, much like if you are a worm in real life, and you find yourself in a video game and prove yourself to be nothing more than a worm by spawn camping against your enemies that make you feel like a worm in real life because you are in fact a worm. It must be tremendously empowering to be a spawn camper, slaying your enemies that you couldn't in real life because you're a worm. Have I said worm enough yet? Worm.
I really hope people are able to enjoy Stardew Valley as a gender-neutral player, concludes Hanna, and that players will be more comfortable when addressed by their correct pronouns or otherwise in a gender-neutral manner.
If a gender-neutral pronoun is being used, then their gender is not being reflected in the discussion, which is surely the whole point to begin with. If anything, this creates an additional problem of how do we get all the genders, all 72, 74-odd genders represented truly with the pronouns that truly reflect the gender that is supposed to be what the person is playing with.
Hanna is far from alone in their dissatisfaction with gender representation in games. LGBT organizations like GLAAD provide free media reference guides for writers of both creative and non-creative works, advising on the best practices for inclusive representation of LGBTQ people.
Just before we continue with the article, I wanted to point out something that just occurred to me. In GTA 5, you can switch between the three main characters. If you switch to Trevor, he'll normally wake up somewhere in his underpants. Sometimes, though, he'll wake up in a dress. He is, of the three characters, the only one that can buy dresses from the cheap discount clothing stores. And he makes for a far better passing tranny than the three that are in that image earlier shown. In fact, I'd say he rocks it, and I on multiple occasions have attempted to rob shops with him in a dress.
The GLAAD guide echoes many of Hanna's points, emphasizing the importance of using a person's preferred pronouns whenever possible and defaulting to the gender-neutral they when uncertain. Similarly, GLAAD encourages representation that looks beyond mere biology, noting that a transgender person's gender is much more complicated than a simple glance at external anatomy can capture. It's for this reason that Fallout modder Grabstein set about removing the gender bias present in Fallout 3's perk system. Grabstein's mod allows characters of any gender to pick the Black Widow and Lady Killer perks, which give you a 10% damage bonus in combat with men and women, respectively, as well as adding in a new perk, Charismatic, that boosts the player's attraction to both genders regardless of their own. Free of arbitrary gender norms, Grabstein could finally roleplay a character that felt true to themselves.
You know, maybe this modder's got a point. Maybe everybody that feels like they're not being truly reflected within a game should learn to be a modder, so they can create the perfect mod for themselves, because essentially it's going to come down to the point that the individual cannot truly be reflected within the game that is to appeal to the majority, because the majority aren't like these individual little delicate teacups.
Mods like Hanna's and Grabstein's allow games to tell more personal stories, ones that we can better identify with.
I often find it's less to do with gender when I'm playing games that makes it easier for me to connect with the character and more what their weapon selection is, whether they can level up and improve their armor, and how good the blowjobs are on the prostitutes I'm going to run over.
The more of ourselves we see in our digital avatars, Hanna and Grabstein say, the more intimate our connection with our plight. I believe we should all be the heroes or villains if we prefer that of our own stories, says Grabstein.
Then play Fable.
I believe we should all have a chance regardless of faith, gender, or sexual preference. With increasingly more non-binary exposure through games, I hope that more people are given the chance to live and play their stories as they feel is correct for them.
When a gaming company decides to make a game, They don't decide to do so to pander to the smallest number. They do it so that they create a game that is not only enjoyable and tells a story, possibly, but also the one that makes the most money with microtransactions or DLCs or just from core sales alone. If you know anything about marketing, you'll know that games that are targeted towards the smallest possible group aren't going to sell or encourage the wider audience to purchase. I mean, you could reboot, but hopefully that lesson has already been learnt by Sony. Well done with Ghostbusters, by the way.
As important as non-binary representation is at the personal level, Grabstein argues that it can be just as valuable on the larger societal level too.
Well, I guess that would depend on the type of game you make. For it to have any impact on the societal level, you've got to appeal to every single group, every single culture, every single ideology, demographic. It's unlikely you could do that. At best, you can encourage gamers to, I don't know, go outside and get some sunlight. Maybe instead of buying online, go to the shop. But that is inconvenient and unlikely to lead to any kind of change at a societal level.
The more non-binaries and non-genders are in the public eye, the more accepting people will become, says Grabstein.
That's only true if those that are, or those that identify as non-binary, can be in real life less insufferable, maybe play the victim less.
I would like to see others attempt mods that balance the playing field a bit more for non-binaries.
Well, I guess we could ask the makers of Pokemon to make a Tumblr version. Catch all the genders in the Tumblr region of Pokemon universe, space, stuff. As long as they don't bring back that stupid ice cream Pokemon, I don't care.
Hanna agreed. I honestly think games reflect reality and vice versa, they say. Simply learning about and understanding LGBT issues in games leads to a greater understanding and acceptance among players.
This is only true if you're able to market a game towards a wide enough audience for that to start to have an impact, which is unlikely to happen if you're force-feeding gender rubbish. And I say gender rubbish because, as we already know, there are only two genders. Expressions and identities are not real, as is the non-binary horse crap.
As empowering as mods like these can be, their bespoke nature severely limits their ability to affect social change.
Well then, to make a real impact, then you shouldn't be meddling in games. You should instead meddle in other things that reaches a wider audience, like education.
To reach a broader gaming community, gender diversity needs to be addressed during a game's development, not after.
Well, that would depend if the game is supposed to be historically accurate, whether or not it is supposed to be societally accurate, or whether or not it is meant to be something a player can have a personal connection to.
I would love to see more representation, not just in video games, but in tabletop or even board games, says Grabstein. More non-gendered NPCs or even PCs that aren't just droids or amorphous aliens.
I love that little use of alien at the end. It means that you're focusing solely on the human race, even in tabletop war games. Which means I can't now say to you that you have, in Warhammer 40,000 especially, many different species of aliens, some of which have a remarkable history, and I think quite a number don't really have genders. Some are just gluttonous, debaucherous fucks. I'm looking at you, Dark Eldar. You guys disgust me.
Grabstein points to BioWare as an admirable example of a studio pushing the boundaries of representation, even if it doesn't always get things right.
Yes, I vaguely recall the vast amount of complaints with regards to Mass Effect Andromeda. Congratulations on that. If you're going to make that many mistakes, don't release it until you've fixed at least half of them, for God's sake.
In light of criticism regarding the transgender character Hanley Abrams in Mass Effect Andromeda, BioWare has apologized to fans and pledged to address the issue in an upcoming patch. Grabstein applauds this approach.
They were never going to get that right. They were never going to handle Abrams right, get it right to appeal to everyone, because there was always going to be one person that got pissed off at how that particular interaction went down.
I'm glad that BioWare listened to consumer complaint and isn't looking to remove the character, they say. She may have been represented a little heavily, but BioWare, thank you for listening and responding appropriately.
By kowtowing before they are labelled transphobic, which is enough of a buzzword to cause significant damage to their reputation.
While mods can do great things, they're limited by the parts of the game that are hard-coded or otherwise beyond the reach of modders. In Grabstein's opinion, the best way to improve non-binary representation in games is to first improve it industry itself. There's still far too many cisgendered in charge of the gaming community who don't take others into account, they say.
So the only real solution is to abide what that Hawaiian math professor said. All those pesky straight white men should quit their jobs, or at least take a demotion, because they're denying trans people, LGBTQ folk, mentors, and other such crap.
Almost every point of view in gaming is from a male perspective. We require more types of people in the game design field, period.
Well, now you have some options. Either you try and get girls interested in video games early on, not just those really dull games that only seem to appeal to girls, or quite a large number of girls, yes. But also, use affirmative action to get the quotas right, denying talent, not saying all guys have talent, but denying those that do have talent from getting jobs because gender's wrong, and of course get those white men to quit their jobs. Or, stop interfering with businesses. Stop trying to push gender identity politics in businesses, and focus on the skills that pay the bills. Let those with talent do their damn jobs. The same jobs that, with the right talent, make a lot of money.
Hanna hopes to see more developers recognize the powerful role pronouns play in one's identity.
Or you could just unroll that scroll which has the infinite number of genders, identities, pronouns, and expressions on it. Then roll it back up and tell the developer you're going to stick it up their ass because that's nearest to their brain.
It might be nice to allow us to choose pronouns in the future, they say. Alternatively, games could avoid pronoun usage altogether, in which case pronoun selection is unnecessary.
Can you imagine if you just said that, how short this article would have been? Now, I would argue gender does play a role in games that have historical accuracy, or games that are societally accurate.
The most important advice Hanna has for developers, though, is to set aside their reservations and simply give it their best shot. The inclusion of just one non-binary character would be a welcome step in the right direction.
And I keenly await Ubisoft's next Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed non-binary to appease the Tumblrites.
My advice to the developers would be, just try, they say. If you're afraid to do it wrong, ask an LGBT person to help write or proofread your character's story. If you try to be compassionate and treat that character's story like any other character, you'll do fine.
And I would tell game developers to keep doing what they do, especially if it makes a game that is engaging to the larger number of people. Thank you all for listening.